Well, hello again. In my last discourse, I read from the Song of God where your Heavenly Father said something very radical. What he said was this, that the salvation of all mankind depends on the true equality of women. But where does the true equality of women begin? It begins by you accepting the fact that you have a Heavenly Mother. But why is that important? To answer that question, all you have to do is look at the world in which you live. Examine the social fabric of the society in which you find yourself. Do you know how this became a man's world? It became a man's world because the Bible, for 2,000 years, has been promoting the attitudes and views of men, while at the same time, it promotes the idea that women are inferior and weak. Christians all over the world pay lip service to a Heavenly Father, but they never acknowledge the existence of a Heavenly Mother. They never speak of her, never pray to her, and they certainly would never allow Heavenly Mother to speak to them. It is as if the great female power behind creation did not exist for the Christian faith. And why is that? Simply because the Bible never says a single word about a Heavenly Mother. And if it had, Western history would have been a lot different. Today we're going to examine what the Bible has to say about women, and then we're going to compare that to what your Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother have to say about women in the Song of God. We will begin by turning to the Bible. Now, I'm going to be turning to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14. And I will be using a King James Bible because I grew up with a King James Bible. But this is what Paul had to say. This is 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in transgression. Now that is a very interesting passage, because what that means is that the person who is responsible for original sin was not Adam, but Eve, the woman. In fact, in theology, Christian thinkers blame women. They say that women pass on the curse of Adam to their offspring. It follows the woman's issue, not the man's. To prove that point, let's all turn to Leviticus. We're going to turn to Leviticus chapter 12, and we're going to start with verse 1, and we're going to read it all the way down to verse 5. Now pay attention here to what this is saying. It goes like this. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. According to the days of the separation for her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. But if she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. Do you know what that means? It means that if a woman has a little boy, she's unclean for 40 days. But if a woman has a little girl, she's unclean for 80 days, twice the length for a little boy. And why is that? It is because the woman is the one who passes on the curse of Adam, not the man, according to the Bible and according to theologians. Let's turn to another verse. We're going to turn to Psalms chapter 51, verse 5, and listen to what this says. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Wow, that's pretty bad. Conceived in sin? That's pretty harsh. But that's how the Bible looks at it. that the mere act of conceiving is seen as passing on the sin of Adam. Let's turn to another verse. We're going to turn to Job, chapter 15, verse 14. What is man that he should be clean, and he which is born of a woman, that he should be righteous? So who gets the blame here? Men or women? Well, according to the Bible, women get the blame. As Paul told Timothy, Adam wasn't deceived, therefore he didn't transgress. Eve was deceived, so she transgressed. Let's turn to another verse. We're going to turn to Exodus 22, verse 18. It's a very short verse, but this verse has had a profound effect in Western history. It simply says this: "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Now, I want to combine this with Deuteronomy 22, and listen to what it says. 22, verse 5. "The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, for all that do so are an abomination unto the Lord thy God." Now, I want you to think about Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc committed two great sins. One, she wore men's clothing, which is clearly against the biblical commandment. And second, she beat men in battle. Now, that just won't do, because women are supposed to be inferior. Women are supposed to be weak. And since she beat men in battle and she wore men's clothing, she must be a witch. And so they burned her at the stake. Have you any idea how many European women were burned at the stake during the Middle Ages? The estimates run from anywhere to 500,000 to 1 million women burned at the stake by Christian clergymen who had the power of the state behind them. That is what Christianity thinks of you. Any woman who dares to be smarter than a man, any woman who does not accept her place in a man's world, back then, in the Middle Ages, would have been seen as a witch. You would have been arrested. You would have been humiliated. You would have been tortured. And then you would have been burned at the stake by good Christians. Let's turn to another verse.